During Lent, I have done a number of messages that have jumped a little bit off of Joan Chittister's book, In the Heart of the Temple. And each Sunday we do a non-biblical reading as well as our scripture reading, because God hasn't stopped talking, and because there are many people that have wonderful things to say. And so I'd like to read just a short paragraph from her this morning. The person with the enlightened heart knows that the purpose of the human voice is to give sound to the voiceless, until finally the world begins to hear what the enlightened heart has come to know. God's presence here, now, in everyone. Where the person stands who has an enlightened heart is more like the reign of God than it was before they got there. The property is beautiful. The litter is gone. The street is safe. The stranger is welcomed. The poor are fed. The refugee is housed. The works of war become works of peace. Nothing else is called holy, because any other defilement of life says that the world belongs to me, rather than that I and it to God.
Our scripture this morning is from the Gospel of Mark. When the Sabbath was over, Mary of Magdala, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought perfumed oils so they could anoint Jesus. Very early, just after sunrise on the first day of the week, they came to the tomb. They were saying to one another, "Who will roll back the stone for us from the entrance to the tomb?" When they looked, they found that the huge stone had been rolled away. Upon entering the tomb, they saw a young person sitting at the right, dressed in a white robe. They were very frightened, but the youth reassured them, "Do not be amazed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, the one who was crucified. He is risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him? Now, go and tell the disciples and Peter, Jesus is going ahead of you to Galilee, where you will see him just as he told you." They made their way out and fled from the tomb, bewildered and trembling. But they said nothing to anyone, because they were so afraid.
Would you pray with me? Essence of the divine, Spirit of God, help us to reach within and touch the light that dwells in each of us, to know that you are here with us every moment of every day with light and love and grace and joy. May we touch that and share that. May the words of my mouth, meditations of each of our hearts, be filled with your insight and your wisdom. Amen. Friday night, we talked about how the many systems of power and greed in this world won, and we mourned the death of Jesus. He was executed as an insurrectionist, a seditionist, a threat against Rome. And I'm pretty sure that after he was executed, there was some celebration going on the parts of Rome and the temple. That they were free from this troublemaker for a while and perhaps could rest easy for a little bit. But there's one thing they didn't count on. They didn't count on the fact that killing one person would not kill a movement. They tried. And yet they found that love was stronger than death. You can believe what you want about the resurrection. It doesn't really matter to me whether you believe that it happened or it didn't happen, whether you believe he rose bodily or didn't, whether you believe people saw a spirit or a vision, or you don't believe any of it at all. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter so much. What we know is that a bunch of his followers had an experience of him after his death that was so strong, so significant, that they continued to preach and heal and baptize and teach in his name. Even when nobody believed him, even when their families disowned them, even when they were threatened and persecuted, even when some of them were put to death, they didn't stop. They kept going. Now, I may be of really weak countenance, but it would take me something really, really, really strong and significant for me to speak out on it to the point of being willing to die for it. But ultimately, I think that his physical death could not kill the power of love that he shared. That power of the love of God that he brought with him and brought out in everyone. And that's what we celebrate today. The power of that love to go beyond death, to continue to seek justice and equality, to continue to bring light to the dark places in the world. And so today is the day that love wins and hope blossoms again. And it's not the only day that love wins. Love actually wins a lot, all the time in this world. You know, Friday we contemplated the fact that the systems of this world, the systems of power and greed, win a lot. And over again throughout history, people have stood up, people of love and people of compassion have stood up for their faith and for their convictions and for social justice and have been killed or imprisoned for it. But all of their movements continued. Somebody eventually took up the mantle of love in those movements. Whether it was for women or children or LGBT folks or refugees or the poor, the lower economic classes, whether it was for animals or land or the environment, somebody somewhere has continued to pick up that mantle of love and share it. The world hasn't been able to kill love. Death cannot kill the power of love. Once upon a time, there were some disciples who begged their master, who was ailing and old, not to die. And the master said, "But if I don't go, how will you ever see?" And the disciples said, "See what? What can we see when you're gone?" And he gave a little smile, a twinkle in his eye, and he said, "My entire life, I have simply been sitting on the riverbank handing out river water. Perhaps when I'm gone, you will see the river." And I think pretty much Jesus spent his whole time at the riverbank handing out the river water of love, the love of God. And he said, "Here, take some. Have some love, Steve. Have the love of God. Take this love, nourish this love, share this love, be this love." And every time somebody has done that, resurrection has happened over and over and over again. Because love has won over greed and anger and hatred and power. Love wins. Joan Chittister, in this book I quoted you, said, we must become the love that God is. We must become the love that God is. You say, well, that's great. How do I do that? Let me tell you a story. True story. A priest by the name of Cheeto Tegal, who was in Manila, was ordained a bishop in the Catholic Church. And shortly after he was ordained a bishop, he was celebrating Mass in Manila. And it was a morning of like a daybreak Mass that was very special to the Filipino people, shortly before Christmas. And so lots of people were there for Mass. And he stood in the doorway of the church in his full regalia, greeting people as they left the church. And he noticed there were a bunch of little street urchins selling flowers that were, calling out flowers, flowers, and getting in everybody's way and impeding people's progress to get out of the church. And he got on their case and he ran after them and he chased them out of the courtyard of the church saying, we don't stop you from selling flowers, but you can't sell them right there. You can sell them over here by the gate. He chased them all the way to the gate and he said, here, this is where you can sell the flowers. Then you don't get in anybody's way. Is this so hard to understand? Do not go past the gate to sell flowers. And these poor kids just stood there looking terrified at him. And he looked at the tallest girl and he said, you, how old are you? She said, 14. He said, is it so hard for you to understand that you can sell flowers up to this point, but beyond this point, no selling flowers? I understand. He looked around and he found the youngest, the smallest, standing right in front of him, dirty little boy, all grimy. And he said, you, how old are you? And the little boy looked up at him and smiled and said, 7. Had a big smile on his face, and Bishop Tegal said, can you understand what I'm saying? And at that point, that little boy just threw his arms around the bishop and gave him a big, grimy hug. Couldn't reach further than his waist, he was so little, and he started to stroke the bishop's back, and he said, Father, you are a bishop now. And it cut right to his heart. And he realized that God was calling him again. Calling him to be love and to speak God to those children, to speak love to those children. And he thought to himself, I had everything I could ever want when I was growing up. I didn't have to do anything but go to school. And these kids have nothing. They have to work every day, even Sundays, just to live. And so he stood for the next half hour, and he had a great time talking with those kids. And he said they taught him again how to listen to God and how to speak God, how to speak love. He's an archbishop now. The time he let the world and its powers and its rules and its policies and its order get in the way of being love, which is what we're all called to do. Simply to be love, to speak love and compassion out in the world. And so when there are little kids who have to sell flowers to live, we must become the love that God is. When children are shot in our schools, we must become the love that God is. When millions of people are chased out of their homes because of violence, we must become the love that God is. when we live in a city that is the fourth worst city in the nation for Black people to live in, we must become the love that God is. When 55% of Racine Unified students qualify for free meals, free lunches, we must become the love that God is. Every day, in every place we are, we have to get out of our Bishop Tagle mode and our finery and hand out river water. Because we finally found the river to hand it out of. And that's when resurrection happens. That's when new life happens. That's when light enters the world. When love